Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds.
Hey, pal. What's your vibe? Need silicone inspiration?
Hell yeah, mate. Get them both, my standard iteration.
Good. Now I would say hop those feet through Glasgow's no-goes to Parney Street, but living as we do in the age of the virus, between us, I'd stick in your houses and click on your mouse thus, because only a fool says there's a rule that you can't buy talent. That's well half kilter. You play the guitar? Well, I play the filter. Gonna add to cart so the noise can start. This module sounds like stars coming apart, like a rip in the fabric of time and space. It's that one in that video that guy said was ace. These modules are odd fuel for music creation. I think they're taking the piss giving them names like this. Do you want to buy a mum, mate? Thanks, I've got one. And her first name is Kate. But names aside, I rate their recommendations, even though radio music doesn't tune to radio stations. Though they also retail haggis, and no, I'm not taking the piss, I will say this, their taste is the bomb. What's their name again? It's signalsounds.com. Why? Hi, welcome to Why We Bleep. This is a podcast about talking to electronic music people and, of course, equipment makers. And with that in mind, I am extremely proud to present a conversation with none other than Limit to Your Lovin' Friends That Break Your Heart In, sultry, big-voice, sub-bass, post-dubsteppin', James Blake. Don't even worry about it. James Blake is an electronic musician. He's a music producer and a songwriter chap. He's originally from Enfield in London, but is latterly a resident of Los Angeles, where, admittedly, it rains a bit less. He's dead good at piano, he sings real nice, and he's really good at making sick beats on his laptop. And he also won a Mercury Award and a Grammy. I think I definitely first took notice of James's tunes with his cover of Feist's Limit to Your Love. That is a track that is sensational for testing speakers because it's just like all voice and all sub. The day I got a Genelec 7050 subwoofer, I put it on in my house in Whitechapel, and when the bass came in, I literally had to dive and smash the space bar because I thought that it was going to make the window panes explode. Not something that you can say about a great many sort of love songs, I don't think, in production terms. But that's just the kind of chap that James Blake is. Now, in case you're new here, I make videos about things called modular synthesizers, which are sort of like horribly expensive Lego for musicians, which is sort of like a tax that sooner or later most electronic-leaning musicians will find themselves considering annihilating what kind of meagre savings remain after their Spotify checks over. It's somewhere between both building the ultimate instrument that is also the ultimate distraction. And I had a surreal experience a few years ago where I noticed that I had been tweeted by James Blake and he shared one of my videos to his multitudinous followers. And so I got in touch with him and I discovered very quickly that James Blake is a modular synth nerd. In fact, James Blake is just a music making nerd, of course. He is a complete fellow music making nerd and all round sound chap. And in fact, I even ended up spending a very, very fun day in the studio in London with a couple of modular cases. I bought a load of stuff. I remember the star of the show was Rainmaker. What an unbelievably brilliant thing for just twisting things in interesting ways. We spent a day batting about ideas in the studio with James and the wonderful Rob McAndrews, who is also known as Airhead, who plays live with James. Rob is a wonderful chap, and he's also a colossal modular nerd. We're all bloody modular nerds. The whole industry is filled with them. Anyway, James has a new album out friends that break your heart. And so it comes to be that he kindly agreed to do a podcast. And in this chat, we talk about his origins. We talk about his writing process in detail. We talk about dealing with reviewers and reviews. We talk inevitably about Aphex Twin, because that's someone that he has a deep appreciation for too. About streaming, modular innovations of his live rig. We talk a little bit about gear, but to be honest, we talk a lot more about just making music when the world is watching. Not an easy thing to do. James's music is undeniably electronic, but I think he retains the human soul in pitch and time. It's steeped in emotion. It's the opposite of robotic, despite being electronic. He is a master of silence. He works hard to write earworms. Re-listening to his music as I was kind of researching the questions for this podcast meant I just was like, for weeks, just infested with the earworms of his tunes, little bits from his tunes repeating endlessly and endlessly in my head all morning, rattling around, as I'm sure they have in yours too. He's very good at that, annoyingly good. And so it was interesting to pick his brains about it. But above all, I can say that James Blake is just a music making nerd. So without further ado, let's chat shit with James Blake. Thanks. The questionable bit.
Fucking hell.
Looks like you've got a good space. Is this your home studio writing boudoir?
Yes, it is.
What is your sort of setup? What are we?
My setup is basically, this is a Pro 3. Can you see what's, I've just got it wired up, essentially. They haven't come and like fit the sort of tie line plates or whatever they call them. It's like there's stuff going through the walls and back round to make sure there's not like leads everywhere. We moved house and I have built a studio in it. But I had a guy called Jacques who built Shangri-La, and I had him come and just build me a little room. So I've got this big shovel, this kind of acoustic shovel just above me, which creates this acoustic space, which when you put it in, the sound of the room, it was like, it went from a cavernous, or not even cavernous, but, like a sort of clangy kind of, the sound of a small room with
zing.
Waves bouncing around
Spang,
it, a zing to it.
Spang.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To something very kind of, not dead, but sounded really nice. Quite tight, just from putting this fucking shovel and this
cloud.
Back,
but it's a shovel. It's not a cloud. I know they put in like when you go into the Albert Hall, they've got like big orbs, UFOs.
Right. Yeah. So this is more of a geometric sort of situation.
Sounds amazing. It's like half diffuser as well as.
Yes. Yeah. And also just creates it sort of creates like because my room is a strange shape. Like over there's like a kind of imagine a square, but then there's just a little bit attached to it, which used to be a bathroom. So I knocked through the bathroom and turned it into a sort of modular / synth wall.
No, that sounds great. I thought you were going to say vocal booth, but your answer is much better.
I don't really do vocals in a booth. I just do them in the room. Like I'll do them like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, it sounds decent in there. What is
it sounds good. And, if it's got acoustic treatment around the room, you've basically got a vocal booth anyway.
Yeah, it's not like you're in a room with a guitarist or something.
Right, and a band and, or just the wrong sounding room, It's like a lot of control rooms are mostly, reflective equipment and shiny wooden floors. And they're not really set up to track. But this room's kind of set up for both, which is nice.
What is your sort of like, I don't know exactly how to put this, but like, you've obviously made music for a long time. What have you then gravitated to as a studio? Like, what is your sort of final configuration. So presumably if you own this house, maybe, then you're always thinking like, what is the
you start to think,
dream? And what is the dream?
Well, I think the type of brain that's attracted to production itself and modular gear and gear, like synths and all that is the kind of brain that fantasizes about a perfect studio. It's the OCD that is going, okay, but it's not perfect quite yet. But actually, a few months ago, I was staying with a friend and they have this amazing house on the east coast of England. And it was a huge sprawling place. They had like a lot of, they had lots of different areas and they'd curated it really well. There's, it's like places for the kids, places for the, adults to have a sort of like barbecue bit and whatever. And it was just really nicely designed. Not like designy, but just, it just felt like a really beautiful family home. And I said to them, when do you think you'll be done with this? Because there were a lot of things still being finished. And she said, oh, it's a home is never done. And the moment it's done, it's dead. And that resonated with me because so many things that I've tried to finish, like a modular setup or a synth collection or a mic chain and a bunch of whatever it is, a studio room. It's like it's never finished. And the moment it is finished, you'll probably feel kind of uninspired by it. It should always feel like it's organically evolving and your interests are always being fed back into it, I think.
Do you then also feel that there's supposed to be this idea that you're meant to like master the instrument and by extension the room as well? I don't know, because I totally agree with you and I know exactly what you mean. And I also have that thing though that, especially like with modular synths, you're like, well, it's the dream is it becomes this actual instrument that you actually master at some point. Do you know what I mean? I suppose
I do.
It depends what the question is, like what excites you and whether it's the sense of if you've mastered something that you can always, go to it and discover things. Like you must have that with the piano, but then you also, it's that sense of wanting to be challenged. I don't know where the balance is.
I just think there is no perfect balance. And I think that if you're learning an instrument, the journey's more fun than the destination, isn't it? And I think when it comes to, that really applies to most things. I think the constant re-upheaval of your studio is part of the fun, and getting new gear and trying it. Like I just bought an MPC Live 2 because I've been using Geist, FX Mansion Geist. I've been using that for about 10 years probably. And it's great. I still managed to, I even got in touch with the company to show me how to install it on M1 Max because, into the newer version of OS 10 because it's not supported anymore. And you have to you have to jump through some hoops. You got to do some clever Mac OS 10 shit to actually install it on a new computer. So I'm realizing that eventually I'm probably going to have to move on from using that as a drum sequencer, but I'm just trying things out. Nothing's come close yet to being as, to being as fluid as the workflow I have with that particular thing. I remember hearing that Burial used SoundForge and, all the people that use Fruity Loops from back in the day who still use Fruity Loops. Fruity Loops has come on quite a lot as a program, but there was a time when it hadn't come along for a long time and people were still using it.
It's always humbling.
And I always wondered why, and it's like, it's just a process thing, isn't it? So I just bought this thing and, I'm not fully au fait with it yet, but the CV and gate out made me think, well, now I've got this thing where I can just look at that rather than a screen, and then I can design drums around a modular sequence, and then I can play my synths, and then I just don't have to think about. I don't want to be staring at a loop going round and round on a screen. Any way I can get away from the screen. So, it's like that might work for a while. I mean, I'll probably make a few bits on that, and then I'll be like, actually, the software isn't that great, and I'll move on because at the moment it does feel a little bit limiting.
Is that a thing of also going stale with things like, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
Well, it hasn't changed. Like the parameters that your people are using to modulate drums haven't changed. So, you know, like what is there more than velocity, pitch, repeats, no repeat, you know, shifting on a grid so you can get the groove slightly different, filter frequency of the drum. There's maybe a few more that I'm not saying, but it's like Geist had all of those 10 years ago, and I haven't seen a sequencer come out that's really done a lot more than that. And so once you get good with one, you just go, well, that's all I really need. And they all pretty much do the same thing. The only difference with the MPC is that I'm going to play in drums and I'm going to leave them unquantized, or I'm going to half quantize them, which I would never do in Geist. So that's really the only reason I got it, was just for the human playability and to make sort of slightly wonkier beats, like shit that just feels like it's like falling over itself or, you know, tripping on itself, because you can do that in a way that's much more natural than that.
Yeah, that feels like the domain of, you need a physical interface to play it. Although I hear like Aphex, and it always comes back to him, but like I get the sense that he's programming, upsettingly, he's programming feel to the degree that he is, which on a XOX style grid, certainly on things like the Circle, which the level of feel that he's able to program is something I've never been able to understand or achieve. And so it's interesting to hear you say that you like, but it sounds like you were kind of doing that in Geist, you just weren't, but you prefer to play it. Like it's easier that way.
Don't know if I prefer to play it. I just think it's something that I'd like to try because it would switch it up for me, and it would, and I think every now and again I get a bit bored of programming beats that way, but I think with Aphex it's like, you know, there's plenty of ways to get groove outside of just moving drums around. I mean, you know, the timing you play a synth against the drums can make the drums feel like they're a different groove. So, you know, if it's like, groove is an interesting one. It's like some Berlin techno is completely grooveless. You know, there's no swing per se, but you create the swing in your own head. It's something that your body does for you. It doesn't, you know, it's like sometimes you can have completely straight drums and they can feel like they've got the most swing ever because you're naturally filling in the snap to that. Those kicks and snares could be totally straight, but everything else is just like rotating around it like it's the sun. And you end up with, on a micro level, those tiny little percussion, those drifts that are happening can make something feel like it's got groove, but it sort of technically doesn't.
I know what you mean. I love also when you're listening to like a little synthy line and then the beat comes in and totally changes the downbeat as well. It's like another one of those wonderful
love that. That's one of my favorite things about like breakdowns and intros and stuff like that, is that you can wrong foot people.
Yeah, in a good way.
As long as it's not being mixed. But hey, sometimes even when it's being
also
mixed.
Have that when you sometimes listen to a synth line and the way, I mean, this is a little bit of a stoner thought, but it's like, I definitely have had this when you're listening to the line and the way you think about it can change it, almost like an auditory illusion. It's like the ba, ba, da, da sort of, there's like a visual illusion where someone's saying the same, you're actually hearing the same sound, but by seeing their lips form a different shape, it changes how you hear it.
Joy Orbison, or Joy-O, is very good at that, in that intro / breakdown that confuses you slightly and then comes in with an incredible counterpoint to it, you know? Like when the drums come in, you're like, oh, that's what the phrasing was. And then you're in. I'm not really sure if I didn't have a history of making dance music, if I would care. But it must have some effect on us. you know, on a natural instinctive level, that kind of thing of like, oh, I thought that was there, but actually it's here, and actually that sounds even better than what I thought. Something that happens to me in the studio sometimes, it happens like once a year, but I'll be working with an artist, I'll write a synth line or something, and we'll be building on that, we'll be writing to it, and then we get to writing, and they're like, oh, can you give me a 4-bar count, or, you know, 4-beat count in to the engineer or me if I'm recording, and I'll go, yeah, okay, here we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the synth starts or the piano starts, and they're like, oh, what was that? That's no, because the one is, where's the one? And I'll be like, that's the one, and they'll be like, no, the one is, and it's like they think beat 1 is beat 3, and then I've basically got to like, because to me that is how the song sounds now. We've been listening to it for 3 hours straight. They've been writing to it, and I've got this acute demo-itis for this one synth line. I can't do anything about it. I basically have to, because I'm producing, I either have to, you know, convince them that it sounds better like this, or I just have to go with it because it's their music. And that is just, I fucking hate that moment. It's happened to me probably about 6 times in the last few years. It's happened with big artists who I didn't want to have to argue with. You know, I didn't want to be like, no, because it sounds shit like that. But, you know,
but hang on,
to my
why
ears.
don't you just record it and then just like, you know, later just lop off a beat from the start or whatever? Well, they'll always hear it their way.
They'll always hear it their way, and they'll always hear the beat in the wrong place. It could be the way they internalize rhythm or the way they hear a melody, and that's just from their influences and whatever. And you just have to agree to disagree. And then it has ruined songs before. Like it's stopped them dead in their tracks because we can't get past it. It's quite funny, but
that is funny. I like how people like misinterpret things though. I'm thinking of my friend Tanya, who misheard the lyric as "I'm on a speedboat, somebody's watching me." You know, I always feel like somebody's watching me.
Oh yeah,
I'm on a speedboat, somebody's watching me, which is sort of.
I've got tons of those.
Yeah, exactly. Which is sort of.
People get my lyrics wrong all the time because they get transcribed. Like before I get a chance to get the official party version out, they get transcribed, and then people start just parroting the Genius or whatever, and you know. So I mean, the biggest culprit is it the darkness or the dawn in retrograde, and is it it's the starkness of the dawn is the lyric.
It's the starkness of the dawn.
It's the starkness of the dawn. I mean, I thought I was clear, but you know, is it the darkness or the dawn? I mean, it's not the worst. It's not like a malapropism, but it's not the lyric.
It's not the lyric, is it?
There's just so many like that in my career.
It's difficult. I mean, music is in the eye of the beholder, as it were. I was reading some reviews. I read some reviews of your music. I'm not going to comment on the reviews, but I was only going to ask about.
Oh, you can. I've probably read them all.
Do you read the reviews?
I've read most reviews.
Yeah.
That have come out. Yeah.
And
most of my music.
What do you? Why? Why do you? That's not a stupid question, I suppose. But like,
no, I mean it's because.
What do you think when you read reviews?
I like to compare the opinions of fans and review it. It's just interesting to me what reviewers say versus what fans say. I remember my dad told me this story of a band in the 70s who got these hideous reviews for their records, and the queues for their gigs were around the block. And it just stuck with me and kind of, you know, I've never taken reviews to heart if they didn't contain some useful nugget of information, right? So I think the real killer of fear is information. Okay, so if I'm afraid about releasing an album or what people are going to think of it, it helps me to know what they like, why they like it, and what they think I did that was not wrong per se, because it's subjective, but what they didn't like about the last record. And it's I'm not writing music for other people, and in some ways I would probably be even a stronger writer if I didn't do that, maybe. But I think it helps me know how to wrong foot people too. It helps me understand what the next move is and what won't be an expected move. It's like, they're not exactly my opponent, but it's like...
No, your enemy.
Yeah, a little bit. Because I don't consider critics to be exactly my friends. There's a strange relationship that musicians have with critics and writers have with critics, but sometimes they are bang on, and sometimes they say something about one of my tunes and I'm like, fuck, you got me. That wasn't the best I could do, and I knew it at the time, and that's okay. Like, I think we should always be a little bit, removed from our music a little bit, just at a certain point. And once the music's out, I'm kind of removed from it anyway.
That's good, because it isn't you. Obviously, it's just stuff you wrote.
That's the thing I realised a long time ago that helped me do that. It helped me look at reviews without feeling pain.
Yeah, and it is like it is surely a learning process. I mean, like the idea that no one should ever feel like they sit down to write a masterpiece, because that's just weird. No one thinks that.
It is, yeah.
That's not how things are written. You just write things. I mean, but it is a bit odd. I just find the concept of reviewing music. What's the quote? That writing about music is like dancing about architecture.
That's amazing.
Just the very idea of a website that puts a score, like 8.9 is sort of that is weird.
It is weird
because I thought about that, and I don't know, that wasn't necessarily the score for your album, but it's an arbitrary score that a website may assign.
No, it was probably close to the average score for my last record.
I mean, that is a good score on that website. But,
I'm being faux arrogant.
I suppose it's just this very... I do think it's really weird that a website assigns a score to an album. I suppose I'm not talking just about a site, but just this idea in general. Find it odd, and I find it weirdly inappropriate for music, because it, especially also thanks to streaming, it's not like you're not out of pocket by streaming something on Spotify, for fuck's sake. I mean, it's just literally, what I mean? And so I just find the whole
would you
process
review if a kid came to you saying, this is how I feel about the world. I feel sad at the moment, and these are the reasons I feel sad, and I think it traces back to this, and I'm frustrated about this. At the end of it, do you hold a scorecard up that says 8.6?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So your emotional expression was adequate, but I think you can do better.
Yeah, I've heard you do better in the past, so...
Yeah, you did better when you were 14, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say they were the golden years. Since then, it's just been downhill. It's just like you got self-conscious.
I'm a parent now, so I'll try that on little Frank.
Yeah.
It's character building, right?
Yeah, right. Just grade their emotional expression. I mean, that is essentially what it is, though, really, because musicians are we're like sort of big kids saying how we feel and putting it to tape. I mean, it's not complicated, really. There's a direct correlation between our emotion and what we choose to do with it, and that is essentially what reviewing is doing. It's saying your emotional expression here
was shit.
Was shit.
You didn't express yourself.
And here it was fantastic. Remember that? So it can be like that, and sometimes it can be. Very rarely does a great record get reviewed really well when it comes out, in my opinion. Like a truly astonishing record usually are not on the end of year lists. There's a lot of very good records that are, for example, on the end of year lists now, but like era changing records, you know, ones that we look back on in 5, 10 years time, 20 years time and say that is when this started to happen because it was so revolutionary. They don't really get the end of year lists.
Funny that, isn't it? It's a bit like Oscar Best Picture. You know, you are at the house, it's late, like, let's watch a film. Like, what you don't put on is the Best Picture winner from 1979.
That's very true.
Whatever that was. I mean, it's
That's
probably
so
a really
true.
good film if I looked it up, but it's not how people, it's not what people enjoy. It's like the fact there isn't an Oscar for comedy. And yet, comedy is what people will gravitate. People watch, you know, When Harry Met Sally still.
Yeah.
You know, I remember we watched that like Christmas actually, like 2 years ago, and everyone laughed and everyone had a really good time. And it's just like, you know.
Yeah. The amount of times, somebody's shown me an amazing movie and I'm like, so was this received well when it came out? And they're like, no, not really. I mean, it didn't win any awards and like this unbelievable performance, it wasn't really recognised and, you know, sorry, I cut you off.
No, but it's true. And I suppose that's the point. It's like, if you review music, you don't account for taste. And the fact that there's some kids somewhere for whom that album can take on huge meaning and be something that they just absolutely like rinse for, you know, 3 straight months and goes into the sort of pantheon of important records. It's just, I find it odd. And so I suppose it's something that you must contend with, because then I suppose the question is, when you make albums, like, what do you have like a grand plan? Are you like, it's got to be big, it's going to be this thing, or is it like make tracks with a vibe and then see what coalesces?
Definitely, it's that. It's the latter, and usually the listeners are kind of a reflection of you on the other side of the glass. To be honest, I mean, the amount of time I put into a record could be the amount of time that some person, you know, 200 miles away, 2,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away gets the record and just sinks time and emotion and energy into it or out of it. And I think I make my records in the full knowledge that they're going to be listened to multiple times and hopefully will stand the test of time forever. Not, you know, just this album cycle, but that in 10 years' time, somebody could listen to a track and go, oh, I didn't notice that about that thing. It's a bit like a good movie will be worth a rewatch, you know. And I've always just been a detailed person. Like I've always looked at things in detail and made things in detail and appreciated the detail in work that I see from other people. And I think, you know, on the one hand, that can mean that some stuff will fly past people because it's not always straight away easily accessible. That's not to say it's too complex for them or, you know, too clever or whatever. It's not a thing like that. It's more like maybe I dressed it too much. You know, maybe there's too many elements and it's not it's not easy to unpack unless you're in exactly the right sort of listening situation and you got the right headphones. I don't want to fall into the trap of looking at music like how many people can I get to listen to this, in the sense of it's nice when lots of people listen to something, but the raw connection that you can make when you just focus on making the music right and a proper reflection of how you felt is worth so much more than the cynical, this will appeal to people brushstroke. Everyone has the propensity to do that, even me, and I don't think, you know, it's not evil. It's just a thought that it's just a capitalistic tendency that arises from our culture. So, okay, how are we going to not apply that to the thing that we do? We've got to strike a balance. Someone put it to me. I was kind of I was at a point where I was going, I wonder if I can like broaden this appeal of this thing I do. I wonder what it would take to do that. Could I do that without compromising? Would it be something that would make me feel bad? Because every time I'm involved in something that I don't like, I always pull out of it. I don't know what it is. I can't tell if it's like perfectionism or just I'm just like averse to that feeling of compromise. And they said, look, it's like if you impact somebody with your track or your song, that person could be changed in that moment. They could be emotionally relieved. They could learn something. They could take that into their day, and their behavior might change slightly. They might feel a bit better. They might treat somebody a bit better. They might pass that energy on, and the person who receives that may or may not do the same thing. You have no idea how many people you can impact with one piece of music on one certain, day, if you truly emotionally connect. And so it's kind of infinite. I mean, you might be looking at, okay, so I've had 1,000 streams for this song, it's like, or 100 or 1 million or 10 million. But what you're actually looking at is meaningless, because the actual resonance of the thing you made isn't reflected in a statistic in any way, shape or form, any more than somebody can slap a score on something. You can only really judge the emotional impact of what you're doing or the resonance of what you're doing on the way people react to you when you go and play live or what people say back to you. It's like those things are really the only thing that matters to me.
My wife always associates, can't believe the way we flow with being pregnant with our son as well. So she gets weepy.
That's amazing.
When she hears it.
Oh.
It's nice. It's sort of the way, it's funny, music and time do like unify. Those tunes, they are very emotional, sort of. It is very emotional music. I suppose it's like, what is your process? Like, when do you feel it's right to sit down and write a track? And what is literally, how would you write a tune? How do you tend to?
I've done it in the past in so many different ways. I mean, a good start for me would usually be recording some piano and vocal improvising. Sit and just kind of hum melodies or, da-da-da, with a lyric maybe in mind or with a lyric that's written on my phone. And I'll sit, let's say, I don't know, like it could be like "Don't Miss It" or whatever was one of the sort of phrases I'd written down, singing versions of that phrase, but 25 times in different melodies and with different chords behind it, and then taking those recordings and sitting with in Logic, just kind of chopping parts out of it, maybe just taking the vocals with the kind of piano bleed through the mic and maybe putting that through a pitch shifter, seeing how I can make it sound, and then eventually being like, oh, I like that part. Okay, so that's a loop. Let's take that loop, and then maybe let's chop a few other things just for like B, C, D sections, whatever, and then starting to make a beat behind it and just see, okay, so the feel of this is making the feel of the swing of the loop, maybe the piano swing or the whatever it is making me feel this way. Okay, maybe this is a halftime beat. This feels like it should be, snare on the 1 and the 3, like, but half time. Then it's like, what bass line would accompany those piano chords? Okay, let's try it. And then I've got a section. And then it's like, okay, where does that go? Is there another part of the sample? Does it lead out of the sample? Like, if I were to take the loop I have and I were to extend the audio to see what comes next, does that next thing feel like a part of a song, or does it just feel like random? Usually it feels like an extension of what happened. So maybe I'll use that. Okay, let's build something underneath that. Maybe it's a different bass line. Maybe it's a new chord progression. Okay, so now we've got 2 sections. Let's see if taking the drums away feels good in this section. Okay, yeah, cool. The drums feel good in this one, but better when they're not involved in this one. Okay, maybe in the 3rd section it's just instrumental, but I bring in a little lead line. Does the lead line what kind of synth do we need for the lead? Let's just try a bunch of shit, go through some presets, see if I've got like anything that's close to what I'm imagining. Okay, this preset sounds pretty cool. Oh, that's an unexpected one. That sounds sick. Okay, stick a filter on that, take some of the frequencies out so it doesn't occupy all of the frequencies. Now we've got 3 sections. One of them is instrumental, one of them's, vocal. The next one is kind of a leading out of that vocal thing. Why don't we take the instrumental section and make that an intro? Let's put a slightly different beat under it. Let's, then you've got maybe we're looking at a 1 minute piece of music now. And then very often I get sick of it and I take all the piano away and all the music, or I filter the vocals so you can't really hear the piano in the background. And then I'll just play some new chords under it. Reharmonize the whole thing so it feels like it is disconnected from what originally happened, but essentially I'm playing new chords under what had been going around my head as a song is now something else.
Yeah.
Sometimes just ripping the guts out of it and just ramming some new guts into it is what forgive the expression, is what turns something from being something a little bit pedestrian into being something truly unexpected and something with contrast, something with a new context. I mean, and then it's like, okay, so I've got a bass line, a drum line, or like some drums, a vocal. I like the vocal. Can I squeeze some more out of the vocal? Can I compress it a bit more? Do I want to compress the whole thing? Should we make it feel squeezed? Should we try some Eurorack stuff over it and see if there's and sometimes I'll try some Eurorack shit, come up with a melody line on like the Metropolis or something, end up with, something that's really nicely modulated and feeling like alive. And that will replace the other lead line I had. And maybe it'll even replace the bass line I had. And then suddenly it's just like, these tracks go through so many mutations. Virtually never do I take a track where it's like, when you see, like I've been watching demonstrations of the MPC live too, right? And it's like, right now, so we get our melody line from Splice. Ding, 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 ding.
Do you not do that?
Ding, 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 ding. And then, okay, that's cool, that's locked in, right?
That's
like,
done.
what? What do you mean that's locked in? And then, now we put down our bass line. Dum, boom, 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 boom. But okay, cool, that's locked in. Right, and now we start adding like hi-hats and trap shit. And you're like, I mean, you can make music like that. You can, but like, it's never going to be the end point for any I don't think any producer is going to sit and make a whole song in one sitting where it's like, it's like by numbers like that, because they all just happen to fit together like some kind of Music Maker 2000, like, or like Dance EJ fucking...
Yeah, Music Maker 2000
thing
on the PlayStation.
Do you remember Dance EJ? It was like...
Yeah.
You just like everything works together because it's all in the same key and all the same BPM. Yeah, I mean, I'm not knocking... listen, I'm not knocking... What I'm knocking is the demo.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that structure of making music. I'm knocking the demo because the demo is making it seem like that you could ever really make a full piece of music like that, which, I mean, I've never been
melodies
able to.
Off. But I mean, it's fair game in a sense. Yeah, I suppose, no, obviously. It's not the end game. But I like the idea that you're sort of, for you, not even the first thing you put in is the end game. That you're iterate and iterate. I suppose that's like, I mean, I definitely can identify with a small portion of that, which is like, I will often make melody or make a track idea and then later make a new track to the right of it using all the components from the left.
Yeah.
The sounds and the vocabulary that had been assembled for it because I'm using virtual synths in that case.
Totally.
But it's that idea of like, you're sort of generationally it's like you're sampling yourself and then resampling and reiterating. It's such an interesting, odd, freewheeling process that can only lead to like really odd sort of organic
Well, I just get sick of honestly, what I was saying earlier wasn't, like I said, it wasn't knocking any other producer's process. I've just watched so many people make music, and I can tell you that I've never seen someone knock something out like that, especially because it always just ends up sounding like someone else or not you. It's not personalized. That's the problem, is that making music with Splice is a really, really interesting tool if you can take what's on there and do something unique with it for yourself and make it you, then that's really great. But if you don't try and personalize it, then you end up with incredibly generic sounding stuff. And I don't think there's anything worse than generic sounding music. It's like adding to the noise.
I mean, you'd say presets are fair game to some degree.
Presets are by the way, I'm not an authority in what you can and can't do. I think you should try everything, and you should try the most basic and the most complex things to get to wherever it is that you want to get to, as long as you arrive at the thing you want. That's all I'm saying, is that it should always be, in my opinion, it's only going to be rewarding and truly satisfying if you just get to what you have in your head, or even just something that represents you, you know.
What I was going to ask about with structure, you were talking about, well, I would like listening to your music. It's kind of, I was struck by how simple it is. I mean, you were literally saying earlier, like, worry that you put too much stuff in, but it's kind of funny because I'm surprised, like, it seems obvious how much you've left out, like, or at least
right.
I know that is not a trivial process. Like, it's like Daft Punk, you know. I was re-listening to, you listen to a live 2007, like, live show, and just like how insanely good they were. And that they're, like, the best thing about what they do is how much they've taken away and how simple it is. And, like, your music is definitely like that. Like, in the sense that you get the sense that you've, I mean, I assume probably had a lot more elements and it's having the maturity to know to leave them out.
That's the same with you. I mean, the things you make are, you know, I mean, and this is mostly going on just the videos that you make, the YouTube videos that you end up making great pieces of music without, I mean, it's not that you don't mean to, it's just that they're not, you haven't made them as a production. You've made them to demonstrate a thing. But one thing I found is that every time I'm trying to show people the best shit I make on Eurorack is when I'm saying to someone, here, come on, I'm going to show you about Eurorack. And then I'm like, so you put the oscillator into the thing, and then look, you can modulate the modulation, and you can look, the LFO doesn't have to be static; it can be moving, and then you can blah blah blah, and then I end up with this amazing patch that I would never have gone in and truly granularly gone in and designed like that. If I'd have been sat on my own, I probably would have left it at, like, you know, phase 1 or phase 2 and ended up with something quite nice, recorded it, and then moved on. But I feel like you just make such great pieces of music as demos. And clearly to arrive at that thing, because, you know, you're doing a jam, and then I notice your cut, and then it's like, okay, here we're at the apex of that jam. And it will feel like you must have, there must have been, you know, elements you took away and curated to get to that point. I'm not sure if it's you that said this. It might be you that said it. I've watched all your videos so much that, I mean, I can basically, if I'm talking, I'm probably about Eurorack, I might even just be regurgitating your words back to you. I remember someone saying that Eurorack is like, you know, people sort of treat it like modern art in a way of like, well, anyone could do that, you know, like it's just, and the answer is always, well, but you didn't. And Eurorack is kind of like curation. I'm pretty sure you did say this, that it's more like curation than composition. It's more like taking the sounds that are coming at you and just like limiting them and kind of, and just, you know, cutting away the stuff that doesn't feel good or doesn't sound nice and euphonic, and arriving at this kind of like perfectly crafted little loop or jam or whatever. And it's a bit like, you know, using an MPC can be a bit like that. It's like, one thing I do like about the MPC is the process means that by the time you're happy with your loop, it's perfect. A 2-bar, 4-bar loop is going to be hitting. Otherwise you wouldn't have let it get there. You know, if you've been listening to it that much, you're just adjusting these little moments, and then eventually you end up with this perfectly crafted diamond, hopefully. Or you just end up with a bunch of shit and you've got to turn it off and go for a walk.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's weird, like making YouTube videos and like demos and stuff is sort of, I've said to you before that like the weird thing is that because there's a camera on it, it's like what you were saying about like demoing Eurorack. It's like, because there's a camera and there's an audience and I know people will see this, it changes what you do and you do make more of an effort in a stupid way. And I think that can be a real curse in a way of just being an artist making music at home. That's why I was always impressed with people like Aphex, who were like, he was trying his hardest without being signed and for no one.
Despite nobody being around to watch.
Exactly. Like he wasn't famous. He was just some irritating lying ginger kid. And then his words, by the way, not just being me. But like he's writing selected ambient works and you know, for his own amusement. And that's just crackers. But well, I mean, it's you get out what you put in, don't you? So it's if you're gonna put that amount of time into something, then hopefully the feeling you get out in the moment, not when you release it, but in the moment, is just pure satisfaction. That's what I'm looking for too. I think for him,
not as well as Aphex Twin did.
No, well,
I'm looking for it.
We all are, I think. He's like, I get the sense that his skill is twofold: is that he can concentrate better than anyone. I cannot imagine the concentration level that he must have to maintain to write the music that he does. And he also has the joy in it. He enjoys the process of writing music more than I think possibly anyone else. And
he makes it sound like he does too.
Yeah.
Like he's not, one of the things about him is that he's not been public, which means he's not, Aphex has probably done the opposite to me, for example, right? So I'm reading all the fucking reviews. You know, it's like we've just discussed how I've read the reviews. I've allowed the spotlight to be on me, and therefore it comes with all of that self-consciousness. And I've gone through years of fear and worrying about what people are going to think of something and all that kind of stuff before arriving at where I am now, which is a much more like free process, but took a long time. And Aphex has just consistently put out brave music. I mean, I'm not comparing the two of us, but I'm saying that, well, in some way I am, but musically I'm not. But he's put out music that has not really paid attention to convention of any kind for years and years and years. And I think for that, he deserves all the praise he gets.
I mean, I saw someone describing like the Collapse EP as him sounding bored. And I was just like, I don't think you know it very much, sir.
I don't think there's a critic on the planet that is qualified to assess Aphex music.
Exactly. To like to tell him that he's doing something wrong or that it's a 6.9, I'm afraid.
Yeah, right. Although there is a dangerous, and I don't know if he feels this, but there's a dangerous thing that happens with, you know, somebody being deified in the way that Aphex has. There's something dangerous to him or to somebody like that about that, which is that everybody just laps it up, whatever it is. I can see the motivation behind him turning up and DJing and not announcing his artist name, which I've seen him do plenty of times, just to see if people are going to enjoy the music without knowing it's him. And so he's changed his sound, or he's doing something new, so he knows that people aren't going to instantly recognize it as Aphex Twin. And then he's gone and done a DJ set, and I wonder if people really are into this, or if it's just that when you put the Aphex logo behind me, everybody, and they can't see me anyway, but they all just assume and know it's me. So is my myth and legend, influencing the way people actually listen to this stuff? And yeah, it is. So I think it's a good idea to turn up and do that. I thought it was great. But yeah, I think people who get that kind of reverence often find it hard. I'm not saying he does, but I think people like that often find it hard to know if what they're doing is truly good or not. Still, because they don't get any criticism.
You need a real reality check. I mean, I suppose I think in the sense that the criticism that stings is always the one that you agree with. So I suppose in that sense, we're all self-critics, and that at the end of the day, I'm sure he is too. I bet. He also said, like, my music is my favorite, is the favorite music. My favorite music that I listen to is my music.
I think if most like writers and composers were honest, they'd probably say the same thing. Because I think most of us are trying to fill a gap in music that we perceive to be there.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to make something that we would listen to.
There are people, aren't there, who say, like, I don't listen to my own music. I've always found that to be the strangest thing to say.
Well, I don't listen to it after it's come out, but while I'm making it, I'm mostly listening to my own music.
Yeah.
Like I've listened to the last 5 tracks. Well, yeah, true. I mean, it's not just for market research or whatever. It's not just for research to see if how I'm gonna finish it, or maybe there could be a melody line there. It's literally because I enjoy it. Like I put on the last 5 tracks I've written recently are mostly what I've been listening to. I mean, I don't listen to it all the time, but I'll every day I'll put one of them on and hear something and be like, because it feels like this, what is it, that allegory about the king wants a diamond that nobody's ever seen, and they all try and find one from the kingdom. He's like, well, you've seen that one, blah blah blah. Like, and then eventually the princess cuts open an apple and shows him the inside of the apple or whatever. It's like I don't know, it's a fucking shape in the middle of the apple, and he's like, oh yeah, no one's ever seen that before.
It's quite a weird allegory, but okay.
My songs, before anyone's heard them, are like my little diamond that no one's ever seen. Yeah. And until they come out, that's how they stay. And then eventually they come out, and then I'm like, over it. I'm like, oh, fucking hell, everyone's seen it now.
See my diamond.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like letting your babies go out into the world, isn't it? I mean, it's nice. Surely?
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah. Review my babies.
Review my 6 out of 10 for my son. No, he's a 10 out of 10, of course. Aphex has also said that he's like, I'm glad to get this shit out. Fuck all this lot off. Yeah. But it sort of implies like they've been annoying him. Like, and I assume that if music is hard work, there is also that old chestnut like, music's never finished, it's abandoned, which I think is true.
I think submitted. I mean, I always said music's never. I never finish music. I just submit it. Abandoning is like, to me. I mean, I don't mean to get pernickety about this little phrase, but that's how I see it. It's
you haven't abandoned it. Like you did.
Yeah, you haven't abandoned when your kid leaves at 18. You're not abandoning them. Like they need to go off and live their own life without you. And I think songs eventually they outstay their welcome, and they just need to go and live their lives. And they live lives, similarly to humans. I mean, some of them live for 50, 60 years. So, we want them to live the best lives they can. But
that's true, isn't it? It is weird. And there'll be people who, I mean, you have the option of then reinterpreting your songs, I guess, when you play them live. And that's a fact. Yeah. Like that Daft Punk Alive thing, they mash their tunes up. So there's a blend part where one tune is literally contains the parts of the other, and you get this wonderful hybrid tune. So anyway, it's not the point, but I suppose
it's great, and they can do that because they're so dialed into what they're making, and the technologically as well.
I think when that show feels very on rails, but it feels on rails in a way that is is the best expression of like non-live electronic music, where it's like that actually is like good on rails. That's like, it's on rails because they've really cared about every minute, and every minute slams, and will slam harder into this with just this little. I think there are things they can adjust, but
what you don't want is like a pre-prepared set that's shit.
Yeah,
it's like that's the worst. I mean, it's really like, well, at least give me, if you're going to train wreck mixes, for example, like if you're DJing, at least make it spontaneous, like, and you're just pulling records out of a bag or whatever. Don't give me, some Ableton set you've spent 2 hours putting together, and then it's like the mixes are out of key. The only time I see the point in doing that is if you're going to design a piece of music that just makes sense and flows, like what you would do if you're a radio DJ or whatever. And I think, that can feel great. It can feel great when somebody's thought about it and the mixes work and the vocals and the bass lines just like work together under the next tune, and you're just like, it's just like a new piece of music, a new experience. I think that's the best of electronic music. Feels really sometimes is when you're recontextualizing something you thought you knew, and then it's coming over the bass line of another tune, and you're like, breakdowns work together, the drop happens, it's like double drops, like shit like that.
When you play live, how live is it? Like, you're playing this stuff, and like presumably do you write the tunes? Is it ever in your mind like, I've got to perform this thing live, or is it always just like a fun thing of like, now I
can't do that.
Work out how I'm going to perform it live?
If I think about the way I'm going to perform a tune live in the studio, then I start doing things that I shouldn't be doing in the studio, like overthinking and like, oh no, I won't use that sound because I wouldn't be able to play it with my hands. It's like, no, that's ridiculous. Just do what you're going to do and then try and translate it. And it's all live. We don't use there's no laptops. I mean, I say there's no laptops because that's the simple. When I tell people, it's completely live, there's no laptops, they understand that what I mean is there's no syncing. Because I'm talking to you, I can go into it. But I've seen a lot of live kind of acts design their set around an Ableton rig or whatever. Sometimes it's necessary because of the type of music it is, maybe. Even when you've got musicians on stage, the tendency is, well, we need something that's like rock solid, that's just going to tie everyone together. And usually Ableton is the source of clock and extra stems and shit that you're going to, you don't want to play yourself, or you can't. And you've only got 3 people and you want to like make sure the sound is as big as possible, blah, blah, blah. I just think that the sacrifice of live playability, malleability, being able to like do something different if something goes wrong, things being different, things being the same every night. I think the sacrifice is too much in terms of enjoying playing. And also, like, what's the point in a drummer? I don't think drummers sound very good against metronomes. I think they sound good as the metronome. Mm. What sounds good is obviously subjective, but there's a couple of universal truths, I think. One is that a drummer tied to a MIDI click ends up sounding like he's accompanying the MIDI click, not the other way around. And he ends up being tied in a way that's not very musical, because groove actually doesn't like feel necessarily human if it's always around this one exact thing. If you see what I'm saying, like his groove actually almost is essentially made obsolete by the metronome. So his natural instinctive way of playing drums is irrelevant now. And so drummers who are tied to clicks like that, click tracks, I always feel like they're basically being taken hostage. I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
Like they want to be like, I can see when they're playing, I can almost see them blinking help. And then the other elements, like stems you're not playing confuse the audience. I think it makes people go like, what's actually fucking happening here? Oh, you know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna like check out. They're either completely checked out already from the live performance aspect, in which case they're just enjoying the music, which is also great, or they're trying to figure out what's going on stage because it's a band and they don't understand why a band wouldn't be playing it. And they're going, wait, but that sound just happened. What's that sound? Where I didn't see anyone play anything. They're all just standing still. What's happening? So that I wanted to avoid that. I didn't want to feel, I load the next project. Okay, now, this is going to, whatever the interaction with the laptop is, would have been too many computer elements for me to then like remember songs and like do, play as well. Doesn't feel very natural. So I just think it didn't work with the way that I like to play music, to use MIDI. What we do instead, we did find a solution to it, which was, because I got into Eurorack, I started understanding, triggers and gates and CV, and I realized that the Yarns module, is it Yarns?
Yeah, mutable.
Yeah, mutable Yarns, it can take a steady flow of gates and come up with a tempo and spit out a clock. But unlike something like Pamela's, it's a bit more solid when it comes to a variable clock, right? So Pamela's is good for taking a clock and spitting out a static, like 120 BPM or whatever. You'll get like slight variations, whatever. But Yarns is good for taking a clock that's changing slightly because it's a drummer's feel, let's say a 4/4 kick drum, and having a wider range of variability. So like if it's ranging from like, let's say a drummer ranges from 116 BPM to 122 BPM over the course of a track, just in case. Yarns will be able to accommodate for that and not just like lose the clock and like stop spitting out information. It is very good for that. So we send that out then to sequencers and all sorts of shit. And what it means is that Ben can play at whatever speed he wants. He can send one of the pads to Yarns, or he can send a kick drum to Yarns, depending on what he wants to do. And he can basically dictate the tempo of the entire track. We can have Metropolis, we can have Variegate, we can have all these different sequences just spitting out eighth note, like techno, or like sequences of like, 3 sequence length, or like 5 note, or like 7 note, or, those kind of
the
like
good stuff. Yeah.
The good shit. Yeah. Like the evolving
Against the 4/4, yeah.
Yeah. Against the 4/4, with like all sorts of filter shit happening. And like, Rob also does Eurorack, so he's good with the, he knows how to get it to feel, like evolving and like mutant. That's what you really want, isn't it? Like if you're going to do a bass line for the song Voyeur, then you want it to be knocking, and it's only going to do that if you know how to get, you can like modulate the envelopes and, on maths, and take the, modulate the modulation essentially. And then we're using a few different oscillators. Like one is Elements, for a couple of things, and
nice.
A few. But
what do you do?
Elements
just, doing like modal stuff.
Yeah, got Elements doing some FM and modal, and just stuff for Voyeur mostly. When we want like a sort of like Ben Clock style techno line, or like surgeon-y type shit, then I'll go for that. And like that is one of the most fun parts of the set for me, is just hearing this modular just spit out, like, and Rob curating these melodies, and me like choosing which notes to play alongside that, and Ben controlling the tempo of the whole thing. And like, and at the end of Voyeur, Ben goes like, from a 4/4 kick, he starts slowing down, and the whole modular's going, and it's just like, I don't know how the fuck Yarns is doing that, but it's so steady the way it changes tempo that you're basically making an entire style of music that's never been made before. Like, I mean, I've heard people slow stuff down, slow the whole BPM of a track down over the course of the thing, but that doesn't usually work within a DJ set, so people don't put it in tracks.
No, they don't.
But in the live set that we do, there's all these dynamic elements that are happening because we're actually outside of the restrictions of DJ tools and of band dynamics and of laptops. So it's like, I feel like we've found ourselves in this genuinely new grounds of music, which I'm so... our live show is the thing I'm very often the most excited about. I find it more exciting than making records sometimes because it's just got that element of like, what the fuck's going to happen? There's no limitations whatsoever.
That's crackers. Because it is off rails. Like
it's off rails.
The James Holden's group, is it Group Humanizer? Have you seen that? It's like
no.
That is it's a Max for Live patch that Mr. James Holden made, which takes the drummer and makes the drummer the master, and it's basically doing what Jans is doing.
That's great.
But I think it does it. It literally takes the swing as well, and it applies the swing to the clock too. So it's like,
wow.
It literally takes the vibe the drummer is creating, so that when he played, I saw him play at Festival Number 6, and you played at Festival Number 6 as well, actually.
Yeah.
I think possibly the same year. But
oh, nice.
But he had a live drummer and his modular, and he did have a laptop, and he had like an arc, the wheelie mono, and then and he was doing amazing stuff, but it was the drummer that led it. Same as
that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah. It can.
I'm so
work.
glad, because I think that's I think it's it's also good to know someone else is doing that. I don't know how long he's been doing it, but it's really important that we've got, considering he built the fucking Max Patch himself, he's probably been doing it a lot longer than we have. But I'm just glad that's happening, because to me, that's the next phase of what bands will be doing in general. To just feel like they're playing. Because what's the difference? I mean, no one even notices that if you've got a stem playing or if you don't have a stem playing, or if you've got, if you're locked in. It's like, really, all that shit is just so that it's for insurance. It's for insurance so that people know that the set's definitely going to work. But it's like, trust in your musicians, man. Like, hire a better drummer if it's not working. It's like, what happened to like proficiency of the musicians playing dictating whether a set works or not? It's like, no, let's try and make it actually musical. It's like, I'm a huge proponent of electronic shit, of computers, of Ableton, of MPCs, of all these things. But I think they should, to me, I get frustrated when they take over and don't add, just remove. They sort of almost like form these kind of like stabilizers. Yeah. And it's like, that's not, I think what's so fascinating about Aphex Twin is he doesn't use technology as a stabilizer. He doesn't use it to like correct his flaws or his inefficiencies. He uses it like he is it. He uses it like he takes them apart. He takes shit apart and puts it back together in a way that makes it work for him. And what's electronically controlled acoustic instruments.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you mentioned before, like, people just lap up Aphex.
Computer-controlled acoustic instruments.
I literally was about to say to you, I don't know about computer. I would whack on computer-controlled instruments just as a casual Sunday afternoon listen. Maybe.
No,
I'd have to be in a pretty oblique frame of mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some songs on there. There's some tracks on there that, like, especially the piano stuff he's done on there that are incredibly listenable and euphonic. But there's some stuff on there that just sounds like. I mean, it sounds like. Robots play. I mean, it's robots playing piano and drums, and it really does sound like, it's like, it doesn't sound like human in some ways, but it's new. I mean, I've never heard anything like that before. That was brand new when that happened. I was like, when that came out, I heard it the day it came out, and I was like, this is completely unique. There's nothing like it in the world. No one's ever done anything like this, and probably no one's going to do anything like this again for at least 10 years. And I was so excited. It was like fucking Christmas. I was just so excited about that record. I loved it.
Now I'm like, I haven't really given it the time of day, clearly.
No, it's not really the fact that I'm not like playing the tunes to my nan at Christmas. Do you know what I mean? Being like, you got to listen to this. It's just, I just love the process of what he did. And I even can get through some of the more challenging elements of it because I'm just so fucking happy that it happened and that he did it. So I'm just like, I'm not really making a point in general other than to say that I stand firmly on the side of using technology to us using technology, not technology using us, essentially, and not being limited by it, but expanded by it in our humanity and our expression.
Oh, bloody men to that. That's a good... I've got more questions there. I was like, oh, I should leave it there. That's just summed it all up. I'll stop making this podcast now. What about, I mean, humanity? What about working? You work with other people, though. I was just going to ask you about that, because that is it's a very like well, this sounds like a stupid thing to say. I was just going to say it's like a very non-electronic music thing in a way. Like only in the sense that a lot of electronic music is a solo pursuit. And so and you started that way? Like as in you started making, I don't really know how you started making music. It'd be interesting to sort of where you came from and then how you go to a person who then produces other artists, and also just what the value for you is in working with other people, which sounds like a really weird, stupid. Do you like people?
The value in working with other people is only in almost only the value you take in being around other people. I mean, I'm an only child who probably spent far too long on their own anyway. Once you've spent that long, not only on your own, but making music on your own, I think there's only so many hours you can do it. And then at a certain point, you hit peak loneliness and you just go, okay, well, I've got to branch out here because this is not only lonely, but also getting less and less creatively interesting. Because
would you say you get stale or what?
Yeah, you like, it doesn't matter. You could be the world's consummate biggest genius in the world and you still have I said world twice. You've only got a certain amount of ideas for music. I mean, if you want to make music every day, you got to collaborate. If you want to make music once a week, or once and do a session a month and like sit and make music once every month, then fine, you can do it on your own. But it's like if you really want to make music a lot and you want to do it for a living, it just gets fucking boring and lonely and depressing to just only do it on your own. I mean, certainly for me, anyway, I really speak for myself here, but I'm pretty sure that eventually you get uninspired, whoever you are. So how I started making music, well, I learned piano when I was a kid. My dad said to me, starting from the beginning, basically, would you like to learn an instrument? And I said, yeah, I'd love to learn guitar. And he was like, well, I could teach you that because he plays guitar. I picked something else. And I was like, I'll choose the piano then. He goes, great. So he got me, luckily he got me piano lessons and I took to it really quickly.
How old were you?
I was about 6 or 7. I just started primary school, so really young. I think he bought me my first sort of little digital keyboard when I was 10 or something.
We're talking like a PSR, not like a DX7.
Yeah, he got me a DX7.
Like Ferris Bueller, who had an Emax or whatever he had. No, he had an emulator.
Yeah.
He's like, it's worth more than the car, mate. Anyway.
Yeah, right. I mean, no, I didn't have anything sophisticated. It was just it was a digital. I mean, it was good for the time. It was good for what we could afford, basically. I mean, it was So the way it worked was we didn't have like disposable income, but what we'd had was he would be like, what do you want for Christmas? So it'd be like I'd get something useful for Christmas. He always made it so that the thing I had at Christmas would be something I learnt something from, and I would use it well into the year, like, so it would be like a little keyboard or nothing too expensive, but it was like, how is this going to help his growth? It was always something practical like that. So that 1 year it was a keyboard, and that kind of set me off on, playing every day. I mean, I might have been 8 or 9, playing every day, singing a lot, because I'd already been singing since I was young. He was always playing music in the house. He had a little, very, very small, probably about a third of the size of this, in our attic. He had a studio, and I remember the walls were covered in cork. He'd like sort of DIY'd it, and he was using, it was an Atari. He was using a DAW on an Atari.
It could be Notator, which is the Notator
Maybe,
that becomes Logic, appropriately enough.
Right, yeah. I think that's why I ended up on Logic, because he started on Notator into Logic. I mean, I'd have to ask him. But basically, he made his albums on tape and that. He wasn't signed. He'd been signed when he was younger, but he'd sort of fallen out of love with the whole record industry and just decided to go his own way. So, my earliest memories are of my dad recording his own album at a time when no one was really doing that. I mean, my dad was a real innovator in that way. Like, there was, this is 93. There's not many people doing their own, like recording their entire own acoustic records.
Not acoustic records. Certainly people
in their house
doing a lot of music with the Ataris
obviously, yeah.
For different purposes.
Yeah.
More weed.
Right. But like coming in and like recording saxophones and like all in your own home studio, which was kind of rare. And so, and no engineer, like he'd wired everything up himself, and he was, doing it. It was remarkable, really. And as a start for me to actually learn some of this stuff. So I knew what MIDI was when I was 8. You know what I mean? And I was hearing records being made when I was really young. So then I play piano and sing well into my, like my late teens. I've learned a little bit about digital stuff. Like my dad used Digital Performer and a bit of Logic, and he showed me a bit of how to use those things, but I never really made anything myself. It was always too intimidating for me. And then around 19, I started going, I'd been clubbing since I was about 14. Right, so I'd been going to like Herbal and all these clubs, drum and bass, jungle, all that, since I was about 14, 15. And around 18, I went to Plastic People for the first time, and I heard, I think it was Koki playing, and N-Type and a bunch of people. I think it was a Digital Mystics night. I remember hearing like Haunted and like all the original dubstep tunes that sort of kicked everything off. This is just after like Horsepower. This would have been 2008, just after the intersection of garage and dub turns into dubstep, basically. I went with a bunch of friends. I wasn't there to like investigate this new type of music. My mate just was like, do you want to come to this night? I was at Goldsmiths at this point. I was like, yeah, let's go. And went there, heard this music and was like, I don't know what's going on, but something about this is really appealing to me. Like I always liked drum and bass and jungle, but this hit on a resonance that I wasn't really ready for. It was a bit like, it appealed to me because Loafer was playing as well. Loafer was playing this kind of like, because I was always into like R&B and hip hop, but then the intersection of dubstep and R&B and hip hop was the halftime beat, right? So it had this like skippy garage element, but it also had this halftime beat that kind of reminded me of slow jams or like, stuff like that. So I was immediately like, oh, this is my tempo. 140 is my tempo. I don't know why, but I just resonated with it. Started like, I was always, and we went to that night a lot after that. And I started making stuff on my laptop. I started just becoming obsessed with making shit on on a laptop. Downloaded Logic. I was like, my dad had always been trying to get me to do stuff on Logic, and I was never interested. And then suddenly I had this obsession with doing it. And I must have made, I was learning how to use synths via Massive and, early versions, cracked versions, obviously, of plugins, because I couldn't afford buying all that shit. But taking an LFO and routing it to a filter cutoff, like the basic stuff that helps you understand the wub. Yeah, trying to design wobble bass lines to figure out, but through trying to design them, like learning about resampling, learning about, it's like Koki's bass lines. I was like, how the fuck does he make that? And somebody would be like, well, he resamples. You're like, what's resampling? And then you go online and you find a YouTube video. Oh, this is how you resample. This is how you create this kind of wobble bass. This is how you create this kind of bass line from drum and bass and blah, blah, blah. And then started applying some of those concepts to my vocals, EQ, compression, distortion, delays, all these things, designing delays, figuring out, okay, so if I put the delay on a bus, then I can record just the delay, and then I can just fuck with the delay and just see if I can make something out of that using compression and blah, blah. Separating the effects from the actual source material and turning that into a thing. Maybe that's a lead line. Maybe like stepping out of the fundamental kind of understanding of music of just like, well, that's a bass line, that's a drum kit, that's a, it's like going, oh no, all of them can basically be any of the other things. So a bass line can be a percussive element, a vocal can be a pad, etc. I think that started to twig, and then I made the Klavierwerke EP I made while I was at university and submitted it for my coursework. And the day the coursework was handed in, I think a couple of days later, the record came out on RNS. So, and I think I got pretty good marks, actually. But it was this like duality between being at home. I was going to this club night, going to my uni classes, well, sometimes going to my uni classes, mostly just staying at home and drinking, and then going home and writing these weird bits on my computer and like going into the uni and recording the piano and then coming like on an R09 Edirol R09 dictaphone, coming back and like chopping those things up and making this Klavierwerke EP. Then I made CMYK because I got obsessed with these R&B vocals that I could hear floating around the internet. People were sending around sample packs, and all these, producers in dance music were starting to use them, or they had been using them from like CDs that you got with magazines, but now they were on blogs and you could download them from, whatever, 320, like RIP websites, where somebody had gone in and like actually got the acapella, or maybe it was an acapella from the 90s that had come out on the vinyl itself and been left, like the B-side would be an acapella. And so I was just sampling Aaliyah, and I was sampling Ashanti, I was sampling like Busta Rhymes, all these different people, and taking these vocals and usually just making a vocal line and then playing chords underneath them that were different from the original tracks. And that ended up being the process that I called, it wasn't a moniker, it wasn't a pseudonym, it was a style of remix that I was calling a harmony mix, which was essentially taking a song like A Milli by Lil Wayne and taking the beat away, i.e. using the acapella, and putting new chords underneath it when it previously basically just been a bass line and a sample. Now it's these chords with all these different inversions that you wouldn't expect under that vocal, recontextualizing it, reharmonizing it, and turning it into something new. That was the harmony mix thing, which I then carried. Sorry, I know this is a long story, but I'm answering your question comprehensively because you said, how did you end up working with other people? So I ended up sort of not pioneering, but for myself pioneering. I mean, it's not like people hadn't been putting chords behind vocals in the past. This was kind of weird because it was like vocals that had just become available to us, and all these weird like synth sounds underneath them that didn't really fit in any genre. Then I was like, well, I'm only doing this with acapellas at the moment, but I could just do this with my own voice. So, I'm starting to write something. I'm like, I'll just take the piano away and just do what I did on that remix, but under my own voice, and see how that sounds. And then you come out with my first record, because that's what that record is, kind of. It's loads of vocals that have been reinterpreted and, whatever. I was like, well, okay, I've done it with my own voice. Why don't I try it with some other people? And a lot of the collaborative processes that I sort of exacted with other people were an extension of that principle. Somebody's singing and we've got this thing going, and then I'll just take the chords away and just do something else. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Majority of the time I get to something that works because I've got so much practice recontextualizing vocals because I've done so many remixes. It's like that process is just second nature to me now, to the point where I can come up with something serviceable pretty quick. And it's an acquired skill that essentially is the lifeblood of what I do. And that really just came from fucking around with vocals from the 90s. That's just the core concept of what has happened in a lot of my music. But, you know, that's because I'm so obsessed with chords. You know, if I could have one thing to make music with forever, it wouldn't be a drum machine or a modular synth. It would be a piano. I'd rather sit with that for the rest of time. It'd be my desert island sort of process. But I think the exciting thing for me is the intersection between all of them and you know, learning Eurorack. I mean, now I'm sitting here looking at this. I've got this big wooden case with like...
You've got a new case.
What is it? How many HP is that? It's hard to know how to describe. Basically, it's like that, but like that tall. And I've been collecting it since I was...
1 JB. It's like a handspan.
It's ridiculous.
It's big, a big handspan.
It's fucking too much. I mean, it's too much stuff. And actually, it's because I developed so many small cases and then I got this massive case and just put it all in one case. And now I'm just completely overwhelmed
I don't think
by looking at it.
You can see it that way, but I think that you have to see it as like clusters or or like a library. You know, I have a lot of modules. I mean, I've sent you a picture of my... Like,
oh, yeah.
These are... Shit, it's really hard. These are 3 boxes. 3 boxes that contain modules, which is somewhat upsetting. But I think there's a friend of mine, Alex, who... I may have mentioned this on the podcast before, but basically he has synths and he has them on the wall and he has them on shelves and they're not plugged in. But when he wants to write something, in the center of the room is a keyboard stand right next to his computer. And he just goes,
takes one.
Picks it, plonks it down, record it, and then put it back. And that whole thing can be extended to Eurorack as well to a degree. Like
that is like a library, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what's good about the palette cases as well. Well, I did see there was someone left a comment. They were talking about someone left like a mean comment about one of my videos, and then the guy was like, "Oh, they were talking about palette cases," and we're like,
"Tell me who he is. I'll go and find."
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, mate. I think she's saying, I think only palette cases only exist for YouTube videos because that's where I see them, and I recognise what he's saying. I suppose what I'm getting at is this: what's nice about the palette case is it's your palette to take a couple of things and then work with it, and that's you can have a sort of stupid amount of gear, but like Aphex, you don't use it all at once because he isn't, and he's. It's interesting when you talk about like the idea of a person. You know, if you're making music alone forever, you eventually become sad and like and you lose your sort of you need a collaborator. But I was thinking, well, but Aphex. And also,
it's possible that he does collaborate, and we just don't know about the people involved. I don't know. I mean, maybe he doesn't. But also he doesn't put that much music. I mean, does he put that much music out?
No, but I think he seems to write a great deal of music. I was going to say that I think the joke with Aphex is that his collaborators, I'm trying to find a synth, are the synths.
Yeah, right.
They're his mates. They're his mates, and they're his mate. Like almost.
But it's possible that his mates are just people who he goes down the pub and chats to, and he doesn't actually sit in the studio that much. It's possible that he just lives a pretty rural life, you know, out in the countryside or something, and just hangs out with his mates and his wife or whatever, and his kid. I don't know if he's got kids. I
don't
really
know if he does
but
or not. I think it's.
I don't know if he's married.
I don't know what
or
to
if he's-
believe from what he's.
But my thing is, like, so many people, especially somebody like that who can really come up with something great, you know, at the drop of a hat, really, can just disappear, not really make much for a while, and just wait until he's inspired and then go and do it. But maybe music's not at the forefront of his mind constantly, and it's just something that comes to the forefront of his mind, and in that moment, magic is born, and we get the sort of produce.
I mean, it's obviously true that there's a lot of music you hear from like the SoundCloud things. It's reassuring to hear that there's a lot of music that's not that great, and it's what's the word? Reassuring, at least, to see some of a peek behind the curtain. That for every like window licker, there is like 100 hours of good music, and then. But do you know what I mean? It's just it is a process of doing it.
Well, he's got his own A&R as well.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe he plays it to people, and I don't know what his auditioning process is for his own music. But I mean, yeah, man, none of us write. Nobody writes great music all the time. Most of the shit I make is not good. Like a vast majority, I'd say, of the music is not good. It's just fun in the moment, and then I listen back to it and I go, it's not really going to go anywhere. Doesn't go anywhere musically. It's probably not going to go anywhere in the world, and I don't love it, and I don't feel anything from it. And when I was making it, I wasn't really that inspired.
Yeah.
You know, I just wanted to make something, and I thought maybe inspiration would strike at some point, and it didn't. You know, that Leonard Cohen quote, you know, you've got to finish cutting the diamond to see if it really shines.
That is a good quote.
I like to, it's amazing. I'd love to always finish cutting the diamond, and sometimes I don't finish. But very often I don't finish. We can't put people on pedestals, really. Even somebody like Aphex, you've just got to acknowledge that his specific set of skills and understanding, you know, like sounds like Taken. But you know, his like very specific DNA in music is unique to him in a way that part of that is life experience and where he was born and what, you know, his brain is made of and how how it functions. And there are people who have spent their whole careers trying to be Aphex Twin. Fine, but it's like you're never going to be Aphex Twin, and you can just enjoy making music. That's all there is to it. That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's not thinking about those people. So, and they're thinking about him. And I think it's just someone can be this brilliant one-off thing, and thousands of people will try and copy that person. And through copying them, they arrive at their own style. And that's when magic can happen for them. But in that period of being obsessed with that musician and not really being able to separate them from their music and just looking at it like it's perfect and everything they must do must be perfect. It's like that is not true for anyone. We are all. He probably like you say, you know, he makes 100 hours of music. And not all of it's good, just like anyone. I mean, the thing that's different about him is he's brave enough to put it on SoundCloud, because that's an incredibly brave thing to do. I've never done that, you know, just like I've always been so fucking like specific and purposeful about the things I put out. And actually, that's a prison. You know, I'd love to just put out more stuff, and because some of it's good enough to put out, I just don't want to put it out. But yeah, he is a fucking genius, like no doubt about it. And there are people like that who I listen to what they do and I just go, God, I've just not even got a clue how I'd ever go about doing that. But we don't have to. We can just
we can listen to
enjoy it.
Copy it badly so as to make something new.
Yeah.
Just say that's what we're always going for. Of course.
We're all influenced by him. We just, you know, got to. I think it was just part for him. For me, he was part of the journey to finding out what it is I wanted to do with my electronic instruments.
with your computer-controlled instruments.
Yeah.
More hand control.
Yeah, electronically controlled hands. I don't know. I have a feeling the future of music is, I think we're currently limited by our sort of listening environments, maybe. I think streaming has kind of created a fast economy for music that may be interrupting the potential in creativity, potentially stopping people from living out ideas.
Making albums, like having things that are played in their entirety and appreciated.
Yeah, I think that, and also the capitalistic element of it and the fact that it's hard to survive as a musician is making it difficult to see creative visions through to the logical conclusion. Because doing that would be a waste of time when all you really need to do to sell records is make the intro 10 seconds. Well, sorry, make the intro 3 seconds and just get straight to the point. You know, there's in every genre, there's shortcuts that are curbing creativity, because ultimately when you see, it doesn't matter how creative you are, you need to make a living. And if you want to make music for a living, and if you look at the formula and you have to incorporate parts of that formula into your work, otherwise you're not going to get airplay. That, unfortunately, like, because of streaming, we're in a kind of like payola situation where there's ways of pushing some things to the top of the pile, and a lot of great music's being lost. Like in the creation process, I mean, is being lost before it even happens, because, you know, people who can't afford, potentially incredible people who would otherwise be able to see their creations through and make something genuinely new, don't get the opportunity to do that from all different cultures, especially if you are disadvantaged and you're, you know. So I think what potentially is the future of electronic music is, and I know there's problems with it, but NFTs they're a very interesting potential avenue to independence. It's not that they themselves are creative, you know, or anything really. I mean, they could just turn out to be a way for people to make money, for musicians to make money, but that wouldn't be a bad thing. That would actually open up creativity, I think, rather than stifle it. Because I think part of the problem, I mean, I saw a quote, Brian Eno talking about NFTs, saying that it could just turn musicians into capitalists. And I agree that it has the potential to do that. But I think I have a slightly different perspective on money in music being there was a time when I thought money was only a corrupting factor in music. But I think that the fact so many musicians struggle so much to make this their living and truly live and breathe it means that they're limited in what they can do and be accepted with. And therefore their creative vision is limited, and we don't get as wide a variety as music as we could in the major channels. So, you know, if NFTs can help people be as creative as they want to be and still make money, then I think that would be a massive victory for electronic music specifically, because electronic music is probably the most feverish pursuit of brand new sounds and brand new ideas of any genre. It doesn't tend to stick to formula. It tends to find a way of innovating something brand new almost every few years, which is not like other genres. I just think it's the one that's it leads the way creatively, I think, sometimes, you know, in a lot of ways, just because of the nature of the way people think about it. So yeah, I think that could be the future of it.
There is definitely, it feels that Spotify has got this kind of, it's creating this like even wider, it's like the 1%, it's like that even wider disconnect between successful artists and people who haven't yet broke through. It's like, It feels like, you know, there's this like sort of rift in the center, and the top is drifting away from the bottom, which is really weird. I mean,
it is.
At the same time that music tools are cheaper than ever, software is either free or like you don't really need to crack software anymore when there's like legit free versions of things and really good systems, blah, blah, blah. But it's just...
And they're all undiscernible as well, because plugins, they're all undiscernible to most people. Like, if you get a plug-in reverb, like convolution reverb or something, or you've got like and it's free, the difference between that and like something by Lexicon or like, do you know what I mean?
It's hard to quantify.
I mean, most people aren't going to even hear the fucking difference.
Democratization of tools, having a phone that you can make music on, which you do and can, is incredible. I suppose it's just also... you know, there's something to be said for the commitment that's required. Like, we're talking about yourself when you're like, you got obsessed with style of music and you had Logic, but you needed the fervor as well.
Well, I made like a beat. What is it? The Kanye thing, like 3 beats a day for 3 summers or whatever. 5 beats a day for 3 summers. It's like I did that.
Yeah,
you know, I really did that. I made thousands of pieces of music in that period, and I still, I mean, I'm still making high rate of that. But
it's then how do you then get a leg into an industry? How do you then become?
I mean, I don't know. People ask me sometimes, like, what would your advice be for somebody starting out? It's like, I don't honestly know. I mean, apart from massive amounts of persistence and obsession, it would be hard to give somebody advice of where to go and who to talk to, because music is so subjective, and you know, the avenue that's right for you is going to be the different avenue than what was right for me. And also the processes now are different, and the websites you go to are different. But like you say, democratization is a good thing, and also a lot of people who wouldn't have otherwise had careers have now got careers and it's fucking great. And it's possible that more musicians have made a living now, but actually sustaining a living, probably not. Like, probably less musicians now are able to sustain a living because of the disparity in how much royalty payment, you know, the method of royalty. Like, the way they release royalties now is just so different. We're literally being paid less on the dollar than we used to be. And so live is everything. And, you know, there's only so many slots at festivals. There's only so many, you know, like, where do you play, you know? COVID, like, has fucked everything. So it's really, really difficult. And I think that's why I think NFTs probably hold the key to, if they can sort the environmental sort of issues out and figure out a way of I mean, hopefully, you know, Ethereum can hurry up and get away from proof of work, and then we can get to, I mean, I'm not really hugely knowledgeable about it, but what I do know is that it would be, from what I can gather, there are some technological advances that would need to happen in order to make it sustainable and be something that it wasn't impacting the environment at all. I just think it's going to open up a direct method of supporting artists, and I think that's just so important, because at the moment we don't have one. I mean, we've got Bandcamp and we've got like things like that, but it's not enough to sort of turn the tide that hasn't just massively gone against us for so long, I think. The way I've seen labels for most of my career is basically, I want to just be able to focus on the music. That's all I want to think about. I don't want to think about anything else at all. Not even, I mean, to some degree, I even kind of took my eye off the ball when it came to my own finances and my own, you know, my actual life, because I wanted to just stay on it. But you can't really live like that without being tremendously fucked over. So you've got to, at some point, develop some independence and understanding of what your situation is. And I think, unfortunately, the more awake you become about royalty payments and, you know, how your music is remunerated. And, you know, I was very mentally ill in my 20s, so I wasn't really looking at any of it. But the more awake I become, the less it makes sense financially and business-wise, like, and the less I look at it and go, yeah, I want to be part of that. I'm lucky because I think I get left alone to just do what it is I want to do. But also, you know, the NFT thing sort of takes you away from feeling any pressure to make money for someone. So like, whatever label you're on, whether it's Universal or a indie electronic label, at some stage you feel pressure to like sell records for that label because they've put their trust in you and blah, blah, blah. I think you spend a lot of your life as a composer trying to get away from any influence like that of like feeling obligation to make money for other people. Maybe there's a collaboration between labels and the new technology, decentralized technology to I mean, you can bet they're going to try and control it. So, you know.
I was kind of thinking that, like, I'm sure if they feel an opportunity to make money, then
yeah,
they'll probably.
Well, it's like the financial institutions got on Bitcoin quick, didn't they? And started, you know, now Bitcoin starts to mirror the stock market. There are so many institutions involved in it, and who knows how decentralized it can stay for how long. But the internet was decentralized at some point. Do you remember that? But I grew up with the internet, so I remember a time when the internet felt free and didn't feel just like a bunch of apps that keep you within their architecture and stop you from like going anywhere else. Felt like there was a genuine like thirst for new information, and it didn't feel lobbied. It didn't feel paid for. It felt like people were just putting information up and being like, this is this, you know, and you didn't have to go, who funds this website? What's their actual motive? Like, it's like now it does feel like the internet that I was hoping would like occur hasn't. It's been institutionalized, really.
Still has the power. I mean, power to connect. It still has an unfathomable wealth of information. I suppose it's just, can you navigate its poisons effectively enough to get...
Well, all that information is going through avenues now, though, that are essentially censored. Things even like, do you remember when Live Leak was just so... It was fascinating that existed. And then they had to kind of shut it down. But there was a freedom, there was a sort of like, even though there was some fucked up stuff on Live Leak, there was definitely a freedom of that, like, website had a kind of anarchy to it. And there's an anarchy desperately missing from the internet now. It doesn't feel free. I think because the internet and social media has such a direct effect on our mental health, that's why I'm interested in it. Because if people feel that they can't express themselves online and they haven't learned to express themselves in person because they've spent so much time online, then they're not able to express themselves at all. I think we're all feeling the collective effect of the internet being corporatized. I think we're feeling how that's changed everything.
I mean, it also sounds a little bit like you're also responding to the way that we seem to have lost the art of respectfully disagreeing with one another.
Yeah.
And there's also a segregation of opinion and thought, which is all social media by, you know, reality shielding people and echo chambering them. It isn't leading to healthy discourse. And there's sort of...
No.
Maybe in schools they need to just teach people how to have arguments, you know, and how to make up. So one of the things
how to be rejected.
Yeah.
I think is the biggest thing is how to be rejected and how to deal with that rejection. Not all of your ideas are going to be palatable to people. And sometimes, you know, when you're rejected, you have to learn how to like take that and not become angry. I think people are dealing with rejection really badly on a mass scale, and it's like turning into a war of words, but then ultimately like it hurts people. So I agree with you. It feels it's not just a technological change, it's also like a change in a kind of tone, a change in tone of the way people receive information, and also just the fact that information is going to certain people and not others. I don't see articles if they don't line up with my algorithm and shit. So, of course, I'm never going to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with me. Like, if you're never exposed to disagreement, then when you finally confront it, then you can't deal with it. And you just end up, you know, feeling offended and confused and angry. And, you know, I'm looking for confirmation bias and I didn't get it. And now I'm angry. You know, there's that a lot, I think. And I think we are about to move past that, hopefully. I think it's going to reach a critical point critical mass of just people hating on each other, and at a certain point you just got to come out the other side and go, nah, you know what, the internet's fucking stupid, let's just hang out.
Is this all about your Pitchfork review? Really?
The less said about that, the better. No, I love getting, you know, I love getting shafted in reviews. It's like a should be a sport.
I think it is for the reviewers, I guess.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's just like, you know, I've got to write like one of these a day, I guess, or possibly more than one.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Fine, you gotta
How long
take
did you
the rough
spend
with the
writing
smooth.
that? 3 years? Well, it's taken me 3 minutes. No problem.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. I mean, look, as long as it, my thing with reviews, if it as long as it doesn't like discourage someone from finding music that would help them, then I don't care. Like for me, it's like music is is literal therapy, or it's figurative therapy. So if that was my issue with the Pitchfork thing, which I said online, which was the whole Sad Boy thing, of like the way they were writing about it was going to potentially discourage somebody who could find emotional respite in this thing. You can say anything you want about my music, but don't fuck up my relationship with people who this music could go out to. Don't like cool kid my shit. Do you know what I mean? Sort of snide comment your way into discouraging somebody from listening to this, because it's not about, oh no, I can't have anyone think anything negative about my music. It's more like, I grew up listening to music that helped me. It helped me. It healed me. It made me feel good. It made me think about things deeper, more deeply. It confronted me sometimes. It made me a better person sometimes. I think if you shame people, then that's going one too far. Criticizing music's fine, but shaming people is something else. That veers into bullying. So, you know.
So 1.0 for that review.
You know.
Thanks very much.
My pleasure, man. I think we talked about pretty much everything.
We've talked to literally all the questions done. It's just white space in the bottom now.
That's great.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, James. That gave me some stuff to chew on. Hopefully it did you. I don't envy James having to submit the reviews that are read on a global scale after you've poured your heart out into a piece of music for years on end. I mean, I do realise it's a sort of an intrinsic part of being a successful artist, of course, but I just think that there's a significant part of me that would be like, fuck off, mate. You try making music and tell me how it should be done. And at the end of it, while you're at it, find me 2 people on earth who like precisely the same things. I'll point out that this medium is nothing less than 100% subjective in its appeal. So pray tell, what is the point of reading one person's opinion of music? It's a bit like reviewing analog filters, to bring it all back to synths, but, or ice cream flavours. Music's too personal. It's too personal. It's intent. It is nothing but personal, as I was saying. So it's just what is the point of this? Anyway, it's not really about James Blake. It's just something that really came up. So my hat is doffed to you, sir, for steeling yourself and just making music regardless. But of course, as Aphex says, we have to be our own worst critics because we do have to progress. That is a reality. There has to be some truth. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of plenty of criticism myself since I have a YouTube channel. And there's no harsher critic than a YouTube comment. That's for damn sure. And I get my fair share of comments, a lot positive and some deeply negative. Some are just like intensely angry people that just pop out of nowhere and just give you just the rawest intensity of their negative thoughts. And I think the smartest response I've ever seen to that, and I doff my cap at Bo Beats for being the one to do so, is like responding with kindness, like actual genuine kindness returned back to pure hatred can be completely diffusing in a way that is remarkable. And I've seen that firsthand, in fact, actually, with comments that were left on his videos. Or I think it was on my video, but referenced him, and he replied with kindness. And there was a man who basically wrote back a few days later to say he was so sorry. He was so upset on that day. He was having a complete sort of just a dark day mentally, and was thankful that we'd replied with kindness rather than becoming angry, because, you know, the reality is that if someone's really upset with you, or, you know, if someone comes to you with anger, the natural response is to return that anger. We become defensive because it's a defensive method. But, you know, the opposite is actually what diffuses the situation. It's responding with love and kindness. And that's, with all that's going on in the world at the moment, feels like the opposite thing to helpful. I don't know. It's very hard to say. I think at this point, all I can really talk about are responding to YouTube comments. That's the only thing that I actually have any sort of useful and valuable input on. With regard to music reviews, the jury's out, especially ones to do with electronic music. There's something about reading an electronic music, a writer writing about electronic music, when they don't make it or like understand the process, it really rubs me the wrong way. I don't know why that is. So thank you for coming with me to my TED Talk about why I'm annoyed about music reviewers. I really haven't had a bad music review, although, as I say, I've had plenty of bad YouTube comments. Yeah. What I loved most about James's comments was his unflinching description of his musical process. And that moment where it's like, and perhaps if you saw the video form of this, you know, you can see my face. I was like, wow, like, you are really telling me how you write music. And it was exactly what I wanted to hear. It was brilliant. Like, no one else has gone into that sort of level of depth. And his process is really interesting. His process is this kind of iterative, self-sampling, metamorphosizing process where he's taking the ball of clay and he's making something and then smashing and making something and then smashing it and making something and remaking the ball of clay in sort of musical terms. Well, it's like in painting, like, you know, like a Rothko or something, you know, where it's like there are many, many layers of paint to a Rothko. It's like layered and layered and layered. And, you know, if you see painters painting, initially there'll be complete reworkings, you know, on some canvases, like they've x-rayed the canvases and there are complete other works underneath, you know, the sort of master's painting that we all come to know. And it's the same thing with his musical process, it seems. That kind of remaking, I think, is a really interesting use of technology. It's something that digital technology is really good at, because it's really possible to take and remake things. And like, really, you've got kind of, you can get under the hood of sounds in a way with electronic music in a way that you perhaps can't, you know, you certainly can't in a band situation. I mean, yes, you can, you know, rewrite the music, but you can't literally access like the atoms of sound like you can in a DAW or on a synth, you know. And I mean, we've got a long way to go. There's certainly other things that we could be doing, like resynthesis and the ability to kind of literally take sounds and out of their constituent parts, like you could do on a you could do on a synclavier. So maybe it's not such a new concept. It's the idea of taking your own music and sampling it. His royal highness Adrian Utley was talking about, I watched this talk he did, and how on Portishead's records they would have dub plates cut of parts, and then they would like rub them on the floor, and then they would sample the dub plates into the archives. So they made their own vinyl records and sampled them in, you know, absolutely delightful. And another form of that kind of like self sort of resampling technique. You can do it many things, like taking things and recording the cassette and then, you know, recording the ambient sound of the cassette player, like a, you know, portable cassette player, playing into a room, playing a cassette of something that you've just recorded. You know, you can create these kind of things that sound like they've been sampled from the ephemera of the world and life, and that they're actually things taken from random bits of material from eons and decades ago, but they're actually things that you've just recorded to a tape and you've just played into a room and recorded to make them sound like the kinds of things that you would have taken from those mediums. There's so many like wicked techniques to be had in this sort of way. So I hope this gives you some thoughts, ideas to take for your own process. And win some bloody Grammys and a Mercury Prize. But remember, nobody writes great music all the time. What has he said? A lot of what I write is shit, and that is something that I can identify with, definitely. I think anyone who writes music knows exactly what you're talking about there, because that's how it is. You don't write great music all the time, you just write music a lot. And the more you write, the better the chance that you will write something great. I've often said, like, I think quantity makes quality. So get writing. Thank you, James. Not least, obviously, for generously giving me 2 hours of your time, but to a relatively obscure podcast. But I also want to thank you personally for your support and encouragement of what I've been doing. Sharing out what I do and being encouraging, both publicly and personally, and being really supportive. It means a lot. So thank you, especially from someone like yourself. It means a lot. Like, Christ, it's bonkers. So thank you. Yeah. What a dude Mr. James Blake is. And then finally, for your reference, the 1979 Best Picture winner was The Deer Hunter. So, no, not a last-minute riot that you would put on every night. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think all that remains is for me to say, if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing and consider hopping on the Good Ship Patreon. www.patreon.com/Milo Melodies. You can help fund this podcast and help the production of future episodes, as well as the YouTube videos that I make. There are loads of other Why We Bleeps. We've talked to lots of other people, and by God, we'll talk to more people yet. So subscribe, stay tuned, and thanks very much for listening. We'll see you next time.